Jerry Cook.
Afternoon and welcome to Politics and the Pulpit here on your hometown station, AM 1220 and 98.1 FM. If you think you're listening to Joe Messina, you're mistaken, because obviously he was sitting in for me last Wednesday, and I want to thank Joe for sitting in for me. Many of you probably prefer Joe over me, but the Italian Stallion does a great job behind the mic. There is no doubt about that. By the way, you can listen to Joe each week here on KHTS each evening from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. and or you could listen to him live, depending on whatever station you happen to have. But Joe's a great friend to me, to the station, and a great asset here to our community. Hope you all had a great Easter or Resurrection weekend, enjoying perhaps church services for those of you who went to church services, or family outings with the family. I know that my family and I had a great time not only at church, but of course we had a great time celebrating the rest of the day. It was 81 degrees in Southern California. I think it was the first day of this whole year where we actually made 80 degrees, and it was a very pleasant day. We were able to eat dinner out on the porch and basically stay outside the entire evening as the weather was so pleasant. It seems like this winter has just dragged on and on and on, but it seems like we're getting a little bit of a Southern California respite here in the last few days, and especially last Sunday when we enjoyed that wonderful weather. Let me give you a few shameless plugs here, as I like to do at the top of the hour. If you are looking for a church where woke Christianity goes to die, then I would encourage you to give Freedom's Way Baptist Church a visit. You can check us out online if you want to do that first. freedomswaybaptistchurch.org, and that's freedoms with an S, freedomswaybaptistchurch.org. And you can check us out there, see what we believe. You can actually go to our YouTube channel, Freedom's Way Baptist Church, via YouTube, and you can see some of the posted sermons there just in case you want to know what you're getting into. Also, if you are looking for a school that will educate and not indoctrinate your children, I'd encourage you to give Lighthouse Christian School and Academy a call. Our school administrator there is Christine Aragon. She is waiting to take your call. You can find out all about Lighthouse Christian School and Academy by going on to freedomswaybaptistchurch.org and going up on top there to the homepage and click onto the button there for Lighthouse and give Christine a call. Many of you probably knew that our initial guest today was Assemblyman Mike Gallagher. Mike, of course, represents Butte County and some of the reddest part of our state here in California. But Assemblyman Mike Gallagher was initially going to come on, but the bill that we were going to talk about, AB 1314, that he and Bill Asales both authored, is not even going to get a hearing. So I wanted to talk about that with the Assemblyman, but there was really no need after the bill got tabled, essentially. Now, for those of you that are out there in La La Land here in California, there are all kinds of horrible, horrible, horrible bills that are up for vote this year in California alone. Now, this bill, authored by Mike Gallagher and Bill Asales, was a common sense bill. Again, it's called Assembly Bill 1314, pretty easy. And it was tabled and is not even going to get a hearing at all. Now, let me just give you a little bit about what this bill would have done, okay? Listen closely. Existing law provides that parents and guardians of children enrolled in public schools have the right and should have the opportunity, as mutually supportive and respectful partners in the education of their children within the public schools, to be informed by the school and to participate in the education of their children as specified to include, among other things, having access to the school records of their child. Existing law authorizes a minor who is 12 years of age or older to consent to mental health treatment or counseling services notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, if, in the opinion of the attending professional person, the minor is mature enough to participate intelligently in those services. Now, I've got news for you. I have a 12-year-old, and he isn't intelligent. That's not to dismiss my 12-year-old. I'm just saying his mind isn't totally formed yet to be able to assent to this kind of stuff. Now, let me tell you what this bill, AB 1314, which is authored by both Bill Esales and Mike Gallagher, let me tell you what this bill would have done had the Assembly at least given it a hearing. Quote, this bill would, notwithstanding the consent provisions described above, provide that a parent or guardian has the right to be notified in writing within 3 days from the date any teacher, counselor, or employee of the school becomes aware that a pupil is identifying at school as a gender that does not align with the child's sex on their birth certificate, other official records, or sex assigned at birth using sex-segregated school programs and activities. Now, all this bill would do is essentially give the parent or the guardian of that child the right to know if that child, their child, is going to school, being dropped off as a male, but is identifying as a female or one of the other 1,000 genders that are, popping up every day. Essentially, parents in California in particular, we'll talk more about the Parents' Bill of Rights that was passed in Congress just a couple of weeks ago, but here in California, this seems stupid that we would even have to have a bill that would suggest that parents would have to have this right. Isn't it just kind of a given that parents have the right to know what their children are doing and what their children are identifying as, or what have you, on school property? Now, that of course makes complete sense to you and I. Complete sense, because we're sane, rational human beings. But there are a clientele sitting in Sacramento, and there's a pretty large clientele of them, that actually don't see parents as having the right to know this. And I really think the cat was kind of basically exposed for what it was a couple of years ago when Glenn Youngkin won in Virginia, and the Department of Justice was being blamed for calling parents who attended school boards during the whole COVID debacle, calling them terrorists, or at least domestic terrorists. I do think there is an agenda here that is probably going to start at a federal level, but obviously we see it here in California, which is a very, very left-leaning state. And again, you would think, parents, that these are just like laws that don't even have to be in the book to suggest that you as a parent, the biological parent or the guardian of these kids, would have the right to know these things. Folks, listen to me. The majority of the schools, specifically in blue states, are state schools. They're state-run schools. And because of that, they are going to look more like state-run facilities that are meant to indoctrinate and take some ideologies that maybe you're giving them at home, maybe Christian convictions or conservative convictions or both. They really want to re-educate and indoctrinate your kids. You know what I think the answer is, folks? I think the answer is more homeschooling and more private schools that do not take any kind of federal or state funding. This means that some of you parents will have to sacrifice an income or might have to sacrifice a career for the sake of your kids. There was a time in American history where a a single parent, if you will, parents could survive with a single income. And usually dad was the predominant breadwinner, right? Now, of course, that's so yesterday for so many people's thinking today that, oh my goodness, we can't survive on just one income. Now, that may or may not be true depending on where you're from. You know, you might be able to survive on one income in Missouri or Kansas, living in a sunflower field. But here in California, it's obviously very, very hard to survive on one income. Now, it can be done. My household survives on one income, and it has survived on one income for 21 of my 23 years of marriage. Now, what does that mean? That means my wife is the person who keeps our home, and I am the predominant breadwinner. Now, if you guys want to be, listen, even if you make $100,000 in California, do you really think you're really going to go places with $100,000? Now, in 1991, we probably thought when graduating from high school, boy, if I could just make $100,000, not in California, that's barely enough to get by. But back to this bill, this AB 1314, before I deviated there slightly, I want to just read what Assemblymember Al Murachi, I don't know if I pronounced his name. He is a Democrat from Torrance. He's the chair of the Assembly Education Committee. He announced his decision not to set Assembly Bill 1314 for a hearing in the Education Committee. This bill would require a teacher, counselor, or school employee to notify a parent within 3 days of becoming aware that a student is identifying at school as a gender not aligning with the child's sex on their birth certificate or sex assigned at birth. So here is what this Democrat who chairs the Assembly Education Committee, who decided to not even give this bill, AB 13, a hearing, here is what he said. All students deserve to be respected and supported for who they are, including at their schools, said Assemblymember. This bill would require educators to, quote, out a student to their parents, even when the student does not feel comfortable coming out, potentially forcing them into an unwelcoming or abusive home. Now, that's a little bit of, I would consider that conjecture and editorializing there because, again, who knows? How does this individual know that they would be entering a unwelcoming or abusive home? Now, that's not to say that it does not happen, but that's a broad generalization, I would assume. And then he goes on and says, as a parent, I believe that gender identity conversations between parents and their children should occur in a safe and private space. Well, I'm so glad that he thinks this. As chair of the Education Committee, I will not be setting AB 1314 for a hearing, not only because the bill is proposing bad policy, that must be his opinion, obviously, but also because a hearing would potentially provide a forum for increasingly hateful rhetoric targeting LGBTQ youth. Folks, all I got to tell you is this. There are people that are elected in the state of California sitting in assembly seats and senatorships and congressional seats that do not believe that you as a parent have a right to know anything about your kids, especially if they are in an indoctrinating facility called a state-run public school. You can do what you want, parents, but for the sake of your kids, if you're listening today and you have younger kids, what I would do is I would sacrifice a career and I would sacrifice an income for the sake of making sure that my kids had a good education where there was education of reading, writing, and arithmetic rather than indoctrination. The great Martin Luther, the reformer from the Reformation days, who essentially the Lutheran Church came out from Martin Luther, he said, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase a quote here, he says that when places of education set aside biblical morality, those places become the gates to hell. Now, you say that sounds like way over the top. Yeah, well, guess what? 10 years ago, you would have never heard an assembly member say what this assembly member just said about this very common sense bill, AB 1314, where a parent should have a right to know what their child is doing behind their back at a state-run facility. But yet, here we are, 10 years later, and we have this assembly member, Al Muratasuchi, I believe, from Torrance, who's chairing the Assembly Education Committee, who has no respect for parents. And I promise you, the preponderance of those on the left don't believe you have the right to parent those kids, especially if you have the wrong political view and you happen to have religious convictions in particular. Well, in lieu of Assemblyman Mike Gallagher, we do have a guest that will be coming in here at the bottom of the hour and joining us live on KHTS and Politics in the Pulpit. Justin Charles, who is with Turning Point USA, will be talking about how Turning Point wants to start clubs on high school campuses, or if you will, to use the talk of the left, safe places or safe spaces for conservative kids and Christian kids who want to have a place to be able to bandy those ideologies about in a public school setting. So when we return here on Politics in the Pulpit with Pastor Jerry Cook, we'll talk to Justin Charles and what Turning Point USA wants to do here, in particular in Santa Clarita, and broadly across the nation. We'll catch you in just a minute. All right, we're back here live on Politics in the Pulpit on your hometown station, AM 98.1 and AM 1220. Just quickly, if you're disgusted with the way that this bill, AB 1314, was basically set aside and is essentially going to be forgotten unless, of course, Mike Gallagher and Bill Asales decide to bring it back up next session, you need to attend your school board meetings and you need to voice your opinions in a very respectful yet forceful manner. You can be forceful, you can be assertive without being loud and obnoxious. We don't want to employ the same technique of the left here and be loud and obnoxious. We want to be able to be winsome and articulate about our position. Just remember, if you were ever in debate class back in high school, the person who started with the name calling was the person who essentially lost the debate, right? So there's no need for name calling. There's no need for being a loudmouth. Let the left and those on the woke left do that. I'm reminded of the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 10, I believe it is, where he is praying for Israel, his brothers in the flesh. And he says about Israel, he says they have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. And I think we can apply that to our own selves when we present ourselves at a school board meeting or what have you. We need to make sure that our zeal is harnessed in such a way that we are able to communicate what we believe in a very winsome and attractive manner. Now, this doesn't mean that you're going to be a pushover or you're a little pansy. You definitely need to be assertive, but there is a way in which you do that without basically turning off half the crowd. So just be real cautious about that because you want to make sure that our position is right. And just let the facts speak for themselves. But as I mentioned at the bottom of the hour, we don't have with us Assemblyman Mike Gallagher, but we have somebody just as important in the world, Justin Charles, who is representing Turning Point USA. Justin, would you say hello to the Politics in the Pulpit crowd today on KHTS?
Hello, thank you for having me.
Justin, I just found out about you this morning from a couple of Karens that we both know. Right. And, of course, not the kind of Karens that you guys are used to hearing you nag you everywhere around, but two wonderful Karens, by the way. But, Justin, tell us a little bit about Turning Point USA. Obviously, many in the audience here know that it's connected with Charlie Kirk, but what exactly are you wanting to do in high schools, not only in Santa Clarita, but nationally if God opens those doors. Justin.
Okay. Awesome. So Turning Point USA has chapters across the country. We have chapters on university campuses and high school campuses, and we promote American values, the Constitution, limited government, and capitalism to our students. We teach them all about these principles, and we have them engage with them, and then do activism events on campus so that they can educate their peers on these issues and kind of really shine a light on these issues, because a lot of times you only have liberal kids who become activists on campus, and then you have liberal teachers, you have liberal administrators. So the Turning Point activists, they're there to kind of push back on a lot of these radical left policies that are invading our schools, even as low as the high schools nowadays.
So we were talking before the show today, and you'd mentioned that Saugus High School right here in Santa Clarita already has one of those clubs.
Absolutely.
And they meet at lunchtime, and lunch is about an hour, I'm assuming, 45 minutes to an hour.
It's about 45 minutes.
Yeah, and so if you have a student that is attending Saugus High School right here in Santa Clarita, know that they have a Turning Point USA club where, or as to use the terminology of the left, they have a safe place to meet and have lunch and fellowship with their friends, right?
Absolutely. It's a great place to meet other students who share your values. Some of the best connections I have is with people who I met through organizations similar but not the same as Turning Point. It's organizations like JCI here in Santa Clarita, where both people are trying to come together for a purpose. I think Turning Point's a great it's a great organization for that kind of thing too. Find somebody who has conservative values like you, and that friendship will be deeper and more meaningful than any other friendship that you have.
Yeah.
So they have an organization on Saugus campus. They have a chapter of about 20 students, but they get about 30 to 40 students at some of their meetings.
Great.
So yeah, stop on by. Say hello.
Absolutely. And is the desire, obviously, Justin, to take what's happening at Saugus High School and broaden that to Valencia High and West Ranch and
yeah,
what have
absolutely. Every William S. Hart school district, I think every William S. Hart school should have one, and so should every school in all of California.
Yeah.
California would be a much better place if we did.
I agree.
But yeah, so I represent the Hollywood territory, and the Hollywood territory, it covers all of western LA County, Ventura County, up the coast of California to Monterey, and then into Central California, and I represent Madeira as well. So if you're in any of those territories, you can always reach out to me at TPUSA High School or TPUSA at HS Hollywood. You can connect with me if that's not where you live. Reach out to me and I'll get you in contact with your field representative.
Yeah. Now, we were talking a little bit before the show, Justin, and you told me that you're originally a Canadian, a Canuck,
yes.
Right? And you were there for the first 10 years of your life.
Correct.
And ended up moving here to Southern California, in particular here to Santa Clarita. Now, I think it would be great, and by the way, I don't think this is wrong for me to say, you're 33 years old. I think it would also be fair to say that most 33-year-olds that are your age that will identify mostly as a leftist, not to suggest that you're left or right, but you just happen to be a person that loves our country, obviously.
That's right.
And so I think people would be interested to know how you came to those conclusions on constitutional conservatism, capitalism. How did you, as a young person, kind of identify in that way?
Awesome. So I started out life, like a lot of people, kind of as a default.
As a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started out that way.
Yeah, kind of as a default left-wing kind of person. I'd grown up under the George Bush administration, and it was really cool not to like George Bush.
Yeah, isn't that weird? And he was such a nice guy in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So then in 2008, there was the Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, John McCain race, and I was a big fan of Hillary Clinton. I went around my school, West Ranch High School, trying to convince fellow seniors to register to vote and vote Democrat so they could vote for Hillary Clinton, because I was not a fan of Barack Obama at all. It was a lot of personal stuff, not policy stuff. I'm biracial. I'm half black, half white.
I can't tell at all.
Yeah, and so when I heard a lot of the stuff that his pastor was saying, the idea that you would go to a church that was saying such negative things about white people and ask your mother to come in while you're, having your children baptized to a church that's that hostile towards people like that, it's that hostile towards people like you, was insane to me. And so I was convinced that Barack Obama was bad for the country, he was bad for everyone, and
not to give his former pastor, a prop here, but that was the Reverend Jeremiah Wright that was saying all those things.
Yeah, and so I was convinced that if he was wrong about that, he might be wrong about some other things. So that kind of opened my eyes.
That's good logical deduction there, Justin.
Yeah, I started looking around, started looking for other ideas. I found Bill O'Reilly on Fox News, and I never really looked back. Went down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, went where the spin stops here.
Yeah.
That's right. Now, why do you think there is such an attraction for the young people to identify in a particular political bent? Why do you think the younger people, even younger than yourself, just feel like, is it like the 50s when the kids basically said we're going to rebel against the World War II generation and we're just going to who cares? Elvis Presley's wiggling his hips. We're going to like it.
No, I don't think so. I think it's a lot of it is peer pressure.
Okay,
it's what their peers see, and it's the pressure of conforming and being like everyone else. Mm-hmm. On top of that, you have administrators and teachers. The left went into education a long time ago, and so they've been marching making a slow march on education, and they've really infiltrated every aspect of education. And so when you have pressure put on teachers by teachers unions, by school boards, and by administrators at the top level, then they promote a leftist kind of agenda, which then these are the people who they spend the most time with, these kids. They spend the most time with their teachers more than their parents, more than their siblings. Like, they're spending a lot of time with their teachers and their friends. And if their friends are afraid to disappoint their teachers, who are, hard left in a lot of cases, then absolutely they're going to be getting huge pressure to conform. And that's why it's important that you have organizations like Turning Point to, give these kids a place to go where they know, oh, okay, so the way I was raised, I'm not crazy. Like, this is normal. There are other people like me, and there are other people who are going through the same thing that I'm going through. And, it gives them just that place to connect and kind of fight back that peer pressure, having other friends who share their values.
Yeah. It's amazing. You'd mentioned you're biracial, and obviously you don't feel like the country owes you any money. You don't feel like the country owes you another apology. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming because you came from Canada, you probably are not a descendant of a slave, I'm assuming?
Mm-hmm. No, so my dad is from Antigua, so that's in the Caribbean. So yes, my ancestors
did
come over on slave ships, but I mean, it's a different mentality being of British, I guess, Caribbean descent versus African American descent, and I think you see that also reflected when we have immigration. Mm-hmm. It's a mindset and it's a culture. When we have Caribbean immigrants, a lot of times they tend to do better in our education system, and it's because I feel like African Americans are told that they're not going to be successful. I don't have one black friend who doesn't have a story about a family member who cornered them, because I grew up in Santa Clarita, so it's a predominantly white area. So all of my friends who are black are, they grew up in this kind of culture, right?
Yeah.
So because they don't reflect the culture of the African American community, their aunts, their uncles, their grandfathers would tell them that they're trying to act white and be white and that they'd never be successful. Every single black friend I have who grew up here has that story of some family member. Whereas that's just not the case with African immigrants. It's not the case with Caribbean immigrants. They're here. They're just like every other immigrant trying to be successful. They're trying to make the American dream happen. And they're successful. I mean, most of the black students at Harvard and Yale and all the Ivies are African. Like, they're not African American, they're African. Yeah. I don't think the country owes me anything. Actually, I would be very upset if there was, reparations, because my mom, she immigrated to Canada from Ireland. Mm-hmm. So she would have to pay reparations for something that her family never did.
Sure.
I mean, I think our side of the family, we don't have anybody who's actually gone to a 4-year university. I mean, they've been factory workers back to as far as we know.
Yeah.
You know, so the idea that we would pay for something that other people did just doesn't seem right or moral.
Well, that's a good way to look at it there, Justin, no doubt about that. Now, Justin, let me ask you a question. How did you get connected with Turning Point USA? How did you find yourself in the position of trying to set up these clubs within high schools?
So I had helped. So previously, I was the Young Republican chair of Santa Clarita. So I had worked
that was you.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So I had worked with Turning Point to try to help them get connections in the community. I had met the previous representative that held my job, Priscilla, and then the previous representative that held my job, Michaela, as well. And so I had worked with them to try to get things started out here, but it was always on the side. I stepped away from the Young Republicans because they moved to a countywide chapter.
Okay.
And I was looking for work. I'd worked in politics. I'd been working on campaigns, and I didn't have a job because campaigns were over. So Priscilla had quit her job, and so I found out about it. I applied, and I was excited to be able to tackle this issue. I think children, particularly in California, or students, particularly in California, face unique pushback from their state government. Their state government is not on their side in a way that's unique to all of the country. Like they face more issues as high school students here in California than anywhere else, and I want to help students push back against that. And so I'm really excited to be able to do that.
Well, that's great. And again, if people want to start a chapter like this in their high school, if they are interested in having you or somebody that's representing Turning Point to come and start a chapter like this, again, give us your information on that.
Awesome. So my Instagram is TPUSA High School, or HS, Hollywood. And then my email, you can email me, is justin.charles@tpusa.com.
All right, you heard it here right on Politics and the Pulpit. Get a hold of Justin and the folks there at Turning Point USA so you can get one of these chapters, one of these clubs started. I don't know, Justin, we got another minute or so. Have you heard about these Satan clubs that are popping up in certain schools?
I have heard about them. I haven't really dug into it.
You don't want to dig too far down.
Yeah, I stay focused. I stay on my mission.
Okay.
And, I got my blinders on.
It's funny because I've been trying to reach out to the supposed spokesman who supposedly lives here in the Santa Clarita Valley to come on and talk about these Satan clubs. And he has yet to reach back to me. Unfortunately, I was kind of hoping. Yeah, I was kind of hoping that we'd have a red hot conversation here about Satan clubs. Minus, yeah, that was good, wasn't it? I thought that was good. Yeah, but evidently they don't want to talk about it. But obviously, we don't want Satan clubs in our schools. We'd much rather have clubs represented by Turning Point USA. So again, if your school is interested, get a hold of Justin Charles here and the Turning Point team, and they will be glad to assist your students in getting one of these clubs, these chapters started in your local high school. So Justin, thank you very much for joining us today on Politics in the Pulpit.
Thank you for having me.
And you are welcome back anytime. We'll come back in just a minute, and we'll have just a few last words. Take care. All right, we're back here live on Politics and the Pulpit. It was great to talk to Justin Charles representing Turning Point USA. And again, get a hold of Justin Charles, if your kid wants to start a Turning Point USA club on their school campus. Let me ask you a question. Would you vote for Eric Early? Many of you have had a chance many times to vote for Eric Early. I guess he just threw his hat in the ring yesterday to be the lone Republican at this point to run for Dianne Feinstein's seat, which she has held for, a great many years, 30 years plus, I believe. But Eric Early, who can be heard on, I think, AM 870, or is it AM 790, one of those two channels here locally, and has his own show, I think ran against what's his face, pencil neck. I forget what Pencilneck's name is right now, but anyway, he ran against Pencilneck, Adam Schiff, in 2020 and lost that race. He also tried to unseat Bonta for the DA for the state of California and lost that race because Hochman, I believe, ended up being the top vote getter against Bonta. And now he's throwing in his hat to be the lone Republican as of right now against Dianne Feinstein. But ironically, he's going to be facing off against 3 Democrats, Katie Porter, I forget the other person's name right now, and then, of course, back to the drawing board, Pencilneck Adam Schiff, who right now has the preponderance of the money. I think he's somewhere around $7 or $8 million he's raised for this race, and it's probably going to be one of the most expensive races in the country for 2024. But again, we're going to try to get Eric early on sometime in the future. Lord willing, I've already put a call on him today, and so Lord willing, he'll call back, and we'll see if we can get him on. Also, next Wednesday, unless something weird happens, like with Mike Gallagher today, we have DA hopeful Jonathan Hatami, who I had the privilege of attending his DA announcement, his run against George Gascon a couple of Wednesdays ago. He will be here live in studio next Wednesday, Lord willing, unless anything strange happens. And you can follow him online as well, Jonathan Hatami, and check out his platform. By the way, just to let you know, the DA race is supposed to be nonpartisan, okay? We know technically everybody has an ideological bent when it comes to politics. I mean, you're going to be left, you're going to be right, you're going to be somewhere in the mushy middle. I prefer you're left or right. At least I know you're hot, you're cold. I don't like the whole lukewarm middle thing. There's something in the book of Revelation about being lukewarm, Revelation chapter 3, where God says, I'm going to spew you out of my mouth. So I'd much rather know if you're hot or cold on the issues. But the fact is, this is supposed to be a nonpartisan race, but I think most of us know George Gascon is a hardcore leftist at his heart. And so getting Soros money, however he got it, whether it was directly from Soros or through one of his chain organizations, either way, he got some of Soros's money. And the same thing with Alvin Bragg and a few other places in the nation where a lot of Soros's money backed some of these DAs, and now most of those cities where those DAs are helming are falling apart, including New York City, where Alvin Bragg is more concerned with Donald Trump than he is other kinds of crime going on in the state, or in the city, I should say. Here's another story that I just saw that was rather interesting. What caused a progressive host to turn on the left-wing nut jobs in the Democratic Party? Now, I've been saying for the last few weeks and years, really, that the Democratic Party today is not the Democratic Party of your parents and your grandparents. If you think that the modern Democratic Party is the party of JFK and FDR and Harry S. Truman, you are so sadly mistaken. None of those three people, FDR, maybe with the exception of FDR, and Harry Truman or JFK, would even have a chance in today's Democratic Party. But some of you know the YouTube site, The Young Turks, that Cenk Uygur is part of. Cenk and Anna Kasparian, posted a few days ago this notion that she believes some on the political left are attacking women by objecting to the activist term birthing person. She has received all kinds of pushback from her own side. Now, again, it goes to show you that people like Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian, and even Bill Maher to a certain extent are representing a Democratic breed that is not being currently represented and echoed in the current party. That Democratic side of things is dead. we are in brand new, uncharted territory. We'll talk more about that next week, perhaps, if some more news pop out about that. But hopefully you'll tune in next week, same bat time, same bat channel here on your hometown station, as DA hopeful Jonathan Hatami comes on, and we'll talk to him about his bid against George Gascon. Again, thank you for tuning in to Politics in the Pulpit. This is your holy host, Pastor Jerry Cook, saying thank you for giving us 1 hour of your time. Hope you share this show with some folks and tell others about us as well. Hopefully we'll catch you next week here on your hometown station. Take care.